What is up, everyone? So today, for like my first real YouTube video that's not a compilation, I thought I'd do something kind of fun. If you're coming from TikTok, you're probably used to me, being on a camera phone, you just scrolling and watching my videos like that. YouTube's gonna be a little bit different. I kind of want to dive deeper into things, make longer videos because I really enjoy making content for you guys. So today what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be tier listing every single Marvel movie from beginning to where we are as of January 21st, 2025. I love Marvel movies. As a superhero content creator, I'm sure that comes as no surprise. I grew up with Marvel movies. The pinnacle of my childhood was when Avengers Endgame came out. I love Marvel movies. I also love tier lists. I think they're really fun to do, and that's why today we are going to be ranking Marvel movies in order of when they came out. So, since we're going in order, obviously Iron Man 1 is going to be the first Marvel movie we're talking about. Iron Man 1, it's the beginning. I mean, obviously, but it's the very first Marvel movie, MCU movie that came out. It was the first MCU movie I remember watching. Iron Man. Tony Stark coming alive on screen. The me not having any comic book knowledge at that moment, so having no idea what was going on, literally jump started this entire MCU journey that so many of us have been on. It's a great movie. Now, I will say, it does have some flaws. I will say at this moment, it can be a little dated at times, but for the most part, his suit looks great. People argue this is the best looking Iron Man suit. He had a pretty good villain in Obadiah Stane. Pretty much a great movie overall. So can I give it the S tier, knowing what other movies we have coming up are? I'm not sure that I can. I'm not sure I can give it an S tier off the rip, but I am confident in saying it is one of the better Marvel movies. We're going to go ahead and slap that thing in A tier. Next up, we have the Incredible Hulk. Here's the thing. Before the MCU was ever a thing, and I was just a little kid looking at, fun animated TV shows or even looking at comic books every once in a while, Hulk was my favorite by a landslide. I loved Hulk. I loved that he was the strongest one there is, and there's a bit of nostalgia around this movie for me. Now, obviously, some people do not like this movie. I understand it. It does have its flaws. There are pieces of it that feel a little weird sometimes, that seem like maybe they're a little bit out of place. For me, I went into that movie theater as a kid expecting to see a full, awesome, hulking monster fight another full, awesome, hulking monster, and that movie delivered. That did exactly what I wanted it to. I don't go watch Godzilla vs. Kong for the plot. I don't go watch Godzilla vs. Kong to see the humans. I watch Godzilla vs. Kong to see two monsters battle it out. And this movie did provide that. Although, I will say, it provided it a little late. Most of the movie felt like a dramatic setup. And yes, we did get Hulk scenes, but it felt like 90% of the movie was setting up that 10% at the very end. Also, it also set up the leader, which, where's he at? Where's he been at this entire time? I have no idea. But as much nostalgia as there is around this movie for me, I am aware that it has its flaws. And because of that, I am going to put this into a C tier. I don't think it ranks super high in terms of Marvel movies, but I don't think it should be at the bottom either. Next up, we have Iron Man 2. I'm going to be honest with you. This was the first Marvel movie that kind of disappointed me. Like I said, as a kid seeing Incredible Hulk, loved it. Did what I wanted it to. Iron Man 2 was the first movie that did kind of let me down a little bit. Especially given how great Iron Man was as a whole in his first movie. I didn't really love the villain. At times he felt cool, at other times he felt a little weird. It was just a strange combination of things for me, especially Justin Hammer. That felt very out of place at times. It did, mark Iron Man going through the condition that he was battling because of his arc reactor, which was a cool concept, but all in all, I felt like this movie really under-delivered for me. In my mind, this also is going to join the C tier for the Incredible Hulk. That's just where it kind of ranks in my opinion. Next up, we have Thor. Again, this movie dramatically disappointed me. I did not really find myself interested throughout that movie. It felt very slow. It felt cheesy. Don't even get me started on the fact that they made Chris Hemsworth's eyebrows blonde and they basically just dissolved into his face. Loki, of course, great character. No one can ever say anything bad about Loki. Thor's big fight was against the Destroyer, which was cool. I don't feel like it translated that well because as soon as Thor got his powers, he just obliterated the Destroyer. And that's not what the Destroyer is supposed to be. The Destroyer is not supposed to be someone that Thor can just instantaneously obliterate. It should have been an actual fight, and it just wasn't. This, to me, is going to be the first movie that slides into that D tier category. Like I said, I'm just not a fan of it whatsoever, and my ranking is going to adjust for that. Next up, we have Captain America, the First Avenger. I think, and you'll see later on in this video, I think Captain America easily had the best trilogy of the big three. Or in this case, the MCU big three being Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America. This movie rocked to me. I really enjoyed this movie. I really liked this movie. I think it delivered on everything very well. I love seeing Captain America become Captain America and then almost be used, or literally be used as a propaganda agent. And then his gradual breaking out of that to become the Captain America that we all know and love, fighting Red Skull, and at the end, just beautifully sacrificing himself for the betterment of the world, but also for the betterment of his love, Peggy Carter. I like this movie a lot. I'm going to go ahead and give this the A tier as well for just being straight up an awesome origins movie for an awesome MCU character. Perhaps the best MCU character. I'll get to that later on. Next up, we have Avengers. Avengers 1. The ultimate startup team-up movie. This has never been done before. Until this point. We've never seen a culmination of beloved characters just all grouped together for a cause like this. And yes, they did introduce some characters in this movie that, hadn't quite had their own origin movies at this moment, but it just meshed so perfectly. Loki being the main villain, as awesome as he was in Thor 1, just absolutely being able to catapult that. Setting up Thanos, the New York fight scene, all of it. Amazing. And this is going to be our first movie that gains S tier level recognition. Next up, we have Iron Man 3. In some people's opinion, this is their least favorite Iron Man movie. I'm not sure quite where I land between it and, of course, Iron Man 2. I will say, in theaters, being much older than I was when the first Iron Man came out at this point, this movie seriously let me down. I did not enjoy the villain. The plot was kind of cool, exploring Iron Man being Iron Man without the armor. That was cool, but honestly, one of my biggest complaints at that moment, watching it as a young man, was his suits just got obliterated, like instantaneously. He would fight a basic villain there, almost like a thug that just had the extremis powers, and they would just melt through his armor. Like it was nothing. I kind of watched Iron Man be, in some ways, a bad superhero. Now, obviously, when he was performing as Iron Man outside of the suit, he had to use his ingenuity and his, just straight up tactical knowledge. That was really cool. But seeing Iron Man just get absolutely shredded by so many villains, and then somehow also beating them at the same time, it just felt really weird to me, especially with such a lackluster villain. And because of that, Iron Man 3 is going to net us the D tier position. We now move on to Thor: The Dark World. If I thought that Thor 1 disappointed me, I had no idea how much Thor 2 was going to do that. The villain sucked. Somehow they just took that entire storyline and just, I don't know, the plot was bad to me. The secondary villain, not that great either. He was just a big guy. That was his role. Big guy, enforcer. And he wasn't even that cool, to be honest with you. They again gave us the whole switcheroo. Oh, Loki's dead. Oh, he's not actually. It's like, okay, man, all the good points of this movie has already been done. And all the bad parts of the movie are just that. They're bad. It did, of course, introduce another Infinity Stone, which was a cool concept. But all in all, I'm going to have to slide this into our bottom tier for Marvel movies. Also, I didn't say this at the beginning of the video. I should have. If you'll look up at the top, you'll see that there is an S plus tier. And if you look at the bottom, you'll see that there's an F tier. The point of that is after I'm done accumulating all these movies into their position, I'm going to choose from the S tier the best of the best in my opinion, and from the D tier, the F tier is now going to be the worst of the worst position. We now move on to Captain America the Winter Soldier. Again, this movie is continuing my thought process of why I think Captain America had one of the, if not, well, yeah, straight up the best trilogy in the MCU. As someone at this stage who still didn't know comics that well, the reveal of who the Winter Soldier was shocked me to my core. I had no idea as a young man watching this movie that Bucky Barnes was the Winter Soldier. It even took me a minute to realize what was happening. But how great of a villain he was, coupled with Captain America being on the run from the very government that he had been serving. He's Captain America, and now he's an outlaw. And having to watch him slowly unveil this process to figure out that S.H.I.E.L.D. had actually basically been Hydra this entire time. Dude, chef's kiss. It is an amazing, amazing movie. Probably one of my favorite MCU movies, point blank period. And because of that, we are moving Captain America the Winter Soldier into the S tier position. We now move on to another team up movie, Guardians of the Galaxy. What's unique about this movie is unlike Avengers 1, we did not have origin stories for these characters. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 essentially served as a sort of jumpstart origin movie. And of course, later on, and many, many years ago, the DCU tried to do the same thing with the Justice League movie, and it just did not pan out, which only shows you how much harder it is to give a Origins team-up movie all at the same time. We were introduced to these characters all at the same time, and unlike Justice League, it worked perfectly. Star-Lord, Groot, Gamora, Rocket, Drax, we instantly loved all of them. They were introduced in such a great way, and it had a decent villain, I will say. Not exactly a top-tier villain, but given everything that was going on in the backstories and how it related to these characters, it meshed. It worked. And also that ending scene where Peter danced off with him and then distracted him and was able to get the stone, and the team all holding hands while they are embracing the power of that Infinity Stone. What more can you ask for? Because of that, Guardians of the Galaxy is going to be moving into the S tier. It is, like I said, other movies on this list disappointed me. This one surprised me in a great way. It was such a great movie. We now move on to Avengers Age of Ultron. I think it's a pretty agreed upon consensus that this is not a bad movie, but it's not as good as the first Avengers. In my opinion, it doesn't really hold a candle to it. I do think that James Spader, I forget what his last name really is, he was a great Ultron. I liked Ultron. I thought that he was a fine villain. I think the ending battle was pretty fantastic. I can't really point to anything in this movie that made it not as good as the first one, besides just a feeling. I can't really explain it. I think it was a good movie. I don't think it was as good as Avengers 1, but all in all, it's still a great movie. The opening scene of this movie is absolutely fantastic when they're all fighting in the woods together. That's probably, honestly, one of the most iconic moments in the MCU is that opening scene. But, like I said, it just didn't feel as good as the first one. And perhaps that's a cop-out explanation. I don't really know. But it just didn't feel as good as the first one. But all in all, like I said, it's a really great movie. But I do think this is going to earn our first B-tier position. I did like Iron Man 1 and I did like Captain America 1 more than this movie. We now move on to Ant-Man. I think people give the Ant-Man series a little bit too much flack. I think perhaps they were expecting it to be something other than what it was. I enjoyed the first Ant-Man movie. Was the villain a little lackluster? Yes. Was the villain a little forgettable? Yes. Was this movie funny without being too over the top funny? Yeah. I think it did a really good job of that other Marvel movies have not done a great job at that. It was funny, but it was also a good movie at the same time without jumping too far into that comedic zone. Ant-Man, good origin story. Paul Rudd killed the spot. Do I think it's an amazing movie? No. Do I think it's a terrible movie? No. And because of that, Ant-Man is now going to be joining Avengers Age of Ultron as a B tier movie. We now move on to Captain America Civil War. I'm going to go ahead and let you know now. This could compete for my favorite MCU movie ever. I loved this movie. I actually saw this movie alone, by myself in the theater. Normally I go with a group of friends. I didn't even want to wait on them. I said, no, I'm going to go see this movie right now. And oh my gosh, dude. The fact that we were able to flawlessly put together teams like Scarlet Witch, introducing Vision as well. Not introducing them, but just meshing them together in a way that it was such a great team-up movie. Iron Man against Captain America. Government controlled versus freedom for the Avengers to do what they want to do. It was such a great movie just put together so beautifully. In the airport fight scene, oh my goodness. Fantastic. Also, just in case you might have forgotten, this movie introduced MCU's Spider-Man to us, as well as MCU's Black Panther. I forget that about this movie sometimes. It introduced two gigantic, just so important characters in this one movie while at the same time pitting them against each other. Also, Baron Zemo killed it as a villain. He wasn't a villain that was going to threaten you physically, but he was a villain that literally destroyed the Avengers psychologically. He pitted them against each other without ever having to lift a finger against them. Amazing movie. Absolutely amazing. And it should come as no surprise that I'm giving this another S tier. We now move on to Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange, what's the best way I can put this? It's like an acid trip in the best way possible, I guess you could say. This movie, at times, gave my eyes a headache, so to speak. At the same time that was happening, I was genuinely enjoying my eye-related headache. It was a good movie. I feel like it nailed the magical aspects of the Marvel Universe that had not really been previously explored. I feel like it nailed it really well. It gave Doctor Strange a great backstory. It had, it had some weird villains. I wouldn't say that they were bad. I don't think that they were amazing by any measure. They were just kind of the typical trope of, oh, here's the hero, here's the dark version of him, we're going to make them fight. The whole Dormammu I've come to bargain thing was a really cool aspect to add in. I thought that was a really cool sequence of just watching Doctor Strange allow himself to die over and over and over again, while at the same time having a time stone that he didn't know was the time stone. Dormammu's design was a little whack. I do hope that they introduce him again sometime soon in the MCU. He's not a character that I think should just be left never to be mentioned again. But, like I said, there were good parts of this movie, bad parts of this movie. I think this also deserves to go along in that same B-tier position. It was good. It wasn't great. But it wasn't bad either. I think B-tier works. Next up, we have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. This is another sequel that I think didn't really live up to my expectations that the first one had set. Do I think it was a bad movie? No. Do I think the Ego was a good villain? Yes. Do I think it explored Peter's origins in a way that made him, if anything, a more relatable character? Absolutely. At the same time, it felt a little disconnected sometimes. It could feel a little choppy to me, and it just overall, to me, lacked the surprise, I guess you could say, of how good Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 was. And perhaps that's because this time I was expecting it to be good, and it wasn't quite as good as expected. Maybe that's my fault. But to me, It just didn't deliver like that first one had. But I am going to give this an A tier movie. I think there is an argument to be made that the Guardians of the Galaxy movies were better than perhaps the Avengers movies have been as a whole. Even though, of course, there's only 3 Guardians of the Galaxy movies and 4 Avengers movies, I think an argument could be made there. I'm not going to make that argument, but I think an argument could be made there. We now move on to Spider-Man Far From Home. I think Tom Holland's Spider-Man as a whole gets too much hate. I think people latched on either to Toby or they latched on either to Andrew. And Tom Holland kind of exists in this spot where he's not really either of them. I think, my personal opinion, I think Tobey Maguire had the best Peter Parker. He was a nerd. People didn't really like to hang out with him. I think Andrew Garfield probably had the best Spider-Man. He probably had the best Spider-Man suit, especially in the second movie. Some of the best web-swinging scenes. And Tom Holland just kind of exists in this middle ground where he might be the second best Peter Parker, but he also might be the second best Spider-Man. I think he's good. I really do. I also understand the argument that he's Iron Man Jr. I think he received a lot of mentorship, and I don't think that that's something that I'm willing to hold against him. He's a young hero who's eventually probably going to become one of the centerpieces of the MCU if he's not already established as that already. Seeing Michael Keaton as the Vulture was awesome. Everyone loved him from Batman. Seeing him back in a superhero movie, especially as a villain, just watching him kill it, fantastic. There's not too much I can say about this movie. I don't think it was as good as some of the other Spider-Man movie. I'm going to give this one a B tier. We now move on to Thor Ragnarok. If you couldn't tell by my previous 2 rankings of the Thor movies, both of them being in D tier, I didn't necessarily love the first 2 Thor movies by any measure. Imagine my surprise when Thor Ragnarok ended up being one of the best MCU movies, at least top 10. It was a pleasant surprise, and it found a way to have a great villain and be funny without jumping too far into it. Seeing them fight on Sakaar was outstanding. Seeing Gladiator Hulk for the first time in a while, seeing Hulk period, but especially Gladiator Hulk, was awesome. Seeing Thor master, so to speak, his powers without his hammer and go against Hela, while also having Loki in there as like a secondary villain, but also a secondary protagonist, it worked. Introducing Surtur at the end to destroy Asgard and leave us at the end of the movie going like, holy crap, where do we go from here? Fantastic movie. I think this movie, in every way, deserves an S tier. We now move on to the first Black Panther movie, of course, starring Chadwick Boseman. Rest in peace. People loved this movie when it first came out. I loved this movie when it first came out, and I still love this movie now. I think it had great action scenes. I think Killmonger, Michael B. Jordan, was an absolutely amazing villain. Probably a top 3 just well-portrayed, awesome villain in the MCU that we've had so far. He killed it in every way possible. Absolutely fantastic villain. There's nothing bad you can say about him. The movie as a whole, pretty great. Still holds up today. Like I said, Chadwick Boseman killed it. Michael B. Jordan killed it. Even the secondary villain, Claw, did pretty great. Nothing you can really say about him. So, because of that, I am going to give this movie an A tier. The only reason I'm not giving it an S tier is because I feel like it lacked a little bit of the blockbuster feel like some of the other movies in the S tier did. I think it's one of the most beloved Marvel movies ever, but of course this is my tier ranking. I give this movie an A, just a hair away from S tier for me. Like I said, it's because it lacked that blockbuster, holy crap, this movie is amazing feeling for me while I was sitting in the theater. Don't come for me in the comments. I still love this movie. It's just not an S tier to me personally. We then move on to Avengers Infinity War. Dude, what can I say about this movie? Loved this movie. Like I said earlier, Avengers Endgame was the pinnacle of my childhood, all just coming to culmination. This was the precursor to it, the thing that set it all up. Seeing Thanos for the first time being Thanos and just wrecking people, using the Infinity Stones, the fight with him and Doctor Strange and Iron Man on the planet, seeing seeing the Black Order come down and fight Iron Man, and again, Doctor Strange on Earth, and just seeing how beautifully it all came together. So many characters on the screen at one time, so many different subplots and categories. Thor getting Stormbreaker. And then, of course, no one will ever forget the snap. The snap was one of the craziest moments I thought they brought to screen. I didn't know if they would actually allow Thanos to win in this movie. I didn't know if they'd make him a one and done villain. I was a little afraid that they would. They didn't. They allowed him to win. The villain won in this movie, and it gave us a dusting scene of some of our favorite characters, including Mr. Stark. I don't want to go. Heart-wrenching. There's nothing you can say bad about this movie, at least to me. I'm giving this an easy S tier. Then move on to Ant-Man and the Wasp. I do have to say, I actually thought the villain was cool. I know some people don't like the villain. They didn't really enjoy what she did for the movie. I thought her power set was super cool. If nothing else, she was a cool villain to me. Can't really, in my mind, can't really hold that against her. This movie as a whole, it was okay. It wasn't fantastic. I don't know. It just didn't feel all that great to me. It felt like a sequel to Ant-Man. It felt exactly like the first Ant-Man did, where you're like, okay, this is good. I don't see myself rewatching this anytime soon, but this is good. And because of that, I give it the same score as its predecessor. It's going into B tier position. We now have Captain Marvel. I don't enjoy the character of Captain Marvel. I think, like many MCU fans. That being said, I don't think this movie was that bad. I really don't. I don't think it was an absolutely horrible movie. I think the villain sucked. I think he sucked. I think we kind of explored Captain America's origins a little bit, seeing Nick Fury, seeing Goose the cat. I liked him. I liked the cat. Seeing Skrulls and their design. Skrulls were actually handled fairly well. All in all, good movie. Some things held it back. In my mind, I think C tier. I'm thinking C tier for Captain Marvel. We now move on to Avengers Endgame. I've already mentioned this movie a couple times throughout this video. This movie rocks. This movie could very easily be my favorite MCU movie. Love this movie. I've said it once or twice. I'll say it again. The pinnacle of my childhood. Seeing all these characters come together, and this is the peak of the storyline. A moment that I have yet to see really happen in many Marvel movies since this one, where I was just absolutely and completely blown away. I mean, everyone kind of thought that there would be some time travel involved, and they were correct. And many people kind of hold that trope against this movie, that it involved time travel and it felt like an easy out. I liked it. It was fine. That allowed us to explore some cool stuff, dive back into some storylines, and see some things that perhaps we didn't think we'd see again. And of course, that ending fight scene, especially when Sam came up over the radio and he was like, "I'm on your left." Dude, seeing everyone walk through the portal, seeing Captain America pick up the hammer, I don't think I've ever screamed as loud in a movie as when Captain America picked up Mjolnir. Absolutely peak cinema moment for me there. And then, of course, we have the Iron Man snap. Probably one of the more sad moments in Marvel history. There were many people in my theater that were actually crying at that moment. I can say nothing bad about this movie. I understand some people don't like it as much as Infinity War. I loved it. We now move on to Spider-Man Far From Home. People have a debate on which of the two first Spider-Man movies, Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, they dislike more. I didn't dislike this movie. I like Jake Gyllenhaal's Mysterio. I liked the kind of plot that this kind of followed. I liked that they were not in America for this movie. We were exploring a kind of a different setting, so to speak. But also the development of Tom Holland's character, the development of Zendaya, Ned. It was a good movie to me. I really don't think I can say anything bad about it. And in my mind, truthfully, I like this better than Spider-Man Homecoming. Spider-Man Homecoming got a B tier. I'm going to give Far From Home an A tier. Maybe some people don't agree with that, but that's fine. This is my list. We then go to Black Widow. Um, People don't really like this movie. I do think that Marvel fans are a little too quick to jump on the oh my god, this movie sucked train. I thought this movie had some good moments and it introduced us to Yelena, who we've all kind of agreed upon is an absolutely amazing character. It introduced us to Red Guardian, played by DK Harbour. I liked him as well. The villain, yeah, not great. I will say a common theme with some of the bad MCU movies is they don't have great villains, and this one just straight up did not. The CGI, really rough sometimes. All in all, could I rewatch this movie? Yeah, probably. Would I enjoy it that much? Not necessarily. I don't think it's as bad as a D tier, but I am going to give this a C tier. We now move on to Shang-Chi. Probably one of the best choreographed movies in the MCU in terms of fight scenes. Uh, Honestly, they kind of killed it with the CGI in this movie. They pretty much did a great job, especially with all the mystical and magical elements of this movie. Seeing Shang-Chi's father, seeing the dragons at the end, seeing everything that was happening with that, having the father honestly be a great villain. I think this movie is very, very well done. I would like to see Shang-Chi again in the near future. I feel like he's been underutilized since, and we haven't really seen him. It also set up some cool stuff that I'm not sure if they're going to deliver on anymore, but we'll see what happens. All in all, I'm going to give Shang-Chi an A tier. I like it. Now move on to the Eternals. I think honestly the Eternals might be the most hated MCU movie. Like I said, I do think that Marvel fans jump a little bit too far overboard as soon as they don't like a movie. I say if you know nothing about the Eternals, nothing about Marvel before you walk into this movie, I genuinely think you might enjoy this movie. Is the CGI a little wonky? Yes. Does the villain suck? Absolutely. Is it a star-studded cast? Yes. Did Icarus an interesting character to me? I genuinely think he was. Unfortunately, they killed him. Didn't really love that decision. I think we saw probably one of the best iterations of a speedster in Makari. I think that was an absolutely great way to show his speedster's powers and kind of flesh that out really well. I think there were a lot of really cool moments in this movie. Unfortunately, they are kind of let down by some of the worst parts of this movie, which is a absolutely horrible villain, bad CGI, and kind of just a weird overall handling of the Eternals as a whole. We did get to see Celestials, which was cool. Unfortunately, this is going to have to slide into the D tier. I don't think it's as bad as some of the other movies in this D tier, but overall, it probably belongs in that tier. Next up, Spider-Man No Way Home. Fantastic. Yes, this movie had loads of fan service in it, but it delivered. Doc Ock, Green Goblin, Toby, Andrew. The kid in me was coming out. Seeing Tobey Maguire, the Spider-Man that I grew up with, jump onto the big screen again. Oh my god. Seeing Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin again without the mask, being able to use the full scale of his acting range. Oh my god. I loved this movie. It is easily one of my favorite MCU movies. I could watch this movie again and again and again. I am giving No Way Home an easy and resounding S tier. So, this is where the tier list is going to kind of differentiate a little bit. Because, in my mind, because they introduced Toby and Andrew in the MCU, the Toby and Andrew movies are kind of like the adopted MCU movies, just because they did make them canon in the MCU. So I'm now going to rank those movies as well. Spider-Man 1. If you couldn't tell by my review of No Way Home, I love Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin. I grew up with this movie as one of my favorite things. I think the cinematography in this movie, some of the shots that they had, especially when Andrew's jumping over the pumpkin bombs, the pumpkin blades, I think it's absolutely fantastic. I think we as fans, especially watching it back now, can all say with a resounding, unifying voice that we hate MJ. She is horrible. Bad girlfriend. You deserve better, Toby. But nonetheless, I enjoy this movie with such a certainty. S tier. The same thing kind of goes for Spider-Man 2. Toby's first two movies were perfect. 10 out of 10 to me in both. A lot of people like Spider-Man 2 more than Spider-Man 1. I understand the argument there. The only thing that makes them close, in my opinion, is how great Willem Dafoe was in Spider-Man 1. Alfred Molina killed it as Doc Ock. He killed it. We also explore something that really hasn't been explored in pretty much any other superhero movie, and it's the superhero losing their powers, having this identity crisis, and having to watch Peter go through that and slowly accept who he is as Spider-Man. Dude, that's awesome. Absolutely. Who wouldn't love a movie about Spider-Man accepting that he is Spider-Man and balancing Peter Parker and Spider-Man, all while fighting one of the most iconic villains in his character's history? Again, MJ sucks, but we're willing to look past that. I am giving Spider-Man 2 an easy S tier. Spider-Man 3. When it first came out, people hated it. Even now, you'll have people who just absolutely root against this movie in its entirety. And I get it. It gave us a terrible depiction of Venom. I completely understand that. The character looked terrible. People hate that he was played by Topher Grace. He's from that 70s show. I mean, I get it. I rewatched this movie maybe like a year or two ago. Probably like 2 years ago. I think it's fine. I don't really have any problems with this movie. It's fun. We dive into this aspect of Harry and Peter being pitted against each other. I like this movie. I think people gave it a bad rap and decided just as a whole that this movie was bad. Is it the worst Tobey movie? Yes. Is it a bad movie? No. If they release this movie today, especially with being able to do Venom a lot better as far as CGI, I think people would like this movie. I'm going to give this a B tier. So, we hit the Tobey movies, let's hit the Andrew movies. The Amazing Spider-Man 1, in my mind, a lot better than The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And I think most people would agree with that. I enjoyed the Lizard. I think he was a good villain. His motivations were kind of funny. He was like, I'm going to turn everybody into lizards. It's like, okay, dude. I think the actor did a great job playing him. I loved seeing Andrew Garfield. My biggest complaint against Andrew Garfield depiction of Spider-Man is I think his Peter Parker was too cool. He rides around on a skateboard. He's someone that I would like to hang out with. He's not really that much of a nerd. That being said, I do like this movie. I don't think it's amazing. No pun intended. I think it's an example of a B-tier movie. We now move on to The Amazing Spider-Man 2. As I said, I like the first one a lot better than the second one. The biggest upside for The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is the suit. Many people think this is probably the best live-action iteration of a Spider-Man suit that we have seen. And honestly, I might agree with you. It was pretty great. Unfortunately, many other aspects of this movie fell short to me. I did not like Electro's design. I liked Jamie Foxx, but I didn't enjoy his design. That kind of took me out of it a little bit. His theme was cool. Seeing Harry Osborn become the Green Goblin, that was handled very poorly in my opinion. I just didn't really like this movie that much. I'm going to go ahead and slide this into the D tier. Maybe that hurts some people. I'm sorry, I didn't like it. We now move on to Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, and we are now starting a trend where we're going to see the next couple of movies be absolute disappointments. I thought Multiverse of Madness was going to be one of the coolest movies ever. I was so excited to see what they could do with all of these different characters from all over so many different sources. And yeah, it gave us some cool stuff. I got to see John Krasinski as Mr. Fantastic. I got to see Black Bolt. I got to see Professor X again. But that's kind of where it ended. Other than that, it wasn't really good. I think they absolutely destroyed Scarlet Witch's character. What was the point of WandaVision if you're going to take all of the character development and flush it down the drain? Um, I just did not like that. I think the acting and the dialogue was subpar sometimes. It just felt rushed. It felt bad. And I was truthfully extremely disappointed with this movie. I am giving this a D tier, which hurts me because, as you can tell, I really like Sam Raimi movies, especially Spider Man 1 and 2. I did not like this movie whatsoever. We then move on to Thor Love and Thunder. Again, continuing the train of this movie disappointed me to my core. I've said a couple times throughout this video that some of these movies handled a blend of comedy and seriousness action very well. This movie did that terribly. This movie was nothing other than poking fun at honestly kind of a beloved character in Thor. They made it stupid. The jokes weren't even funny. And oh my god, the CGI at times was horrendous. When I saw Heimdall's son floating head, I honestly wanted to walk out of the movie theater at that exact moment. And yes, I know I've said a couple times that Marvel fans tend to jump on the oh my god, I hate this train too much. All aboard. I hate this movie. Absolutely despise this movie. It was terrible. They wasted a fantastic villain. Christian Bale as Gore was great. It sucks that we only got 30 seconds of him. If you can't tell, I hate this movie. Easy D tier. We now move on to Wakanda Forever. I think we can all agree this wasn't as good as the first Black Panther. I think the thing that made this movie better and the thing that saved this movie was Namor. Great character. I think the actor who played him did very well. Did a great job fleshing out his backstory. How it dealt with that underwater city was really cool. How they portrayed it was really cool. I think Shuri did a good job as Black Panther. I think the Midnight Angels was a terrible design. I think there were a lot of concepts of this movie that just didn't pan out while others did. All in all, I'm going to unfortunately have to give this a C tier. Just because, like I said, in my mind, this movie was saved by Namor and nothing else, honestly. And now move on to Quantum Mania. Luckily, this ends the stream, or this is the last movie that is going to be in the, oh my god, stream of disappointed movies to me. Kang the Conqueror, an Avengers level threat, plus. One of the most interesting characters in Marvel Comics history was defeated by literal ants. Ants. He was defeated by ants. I think Jonathan Majors did a great job portraying the character. Unfortunately, I think this movie was just bad. There's not many saving graces I can think besides of Kang the Conqueror, and even that, they kind of ruined it at the end by having him defeated by ants. And unfortunately, it looks like we're never going to see Kang the Conqueror again. They basically made one of the most impactful Marvel Comics villains, perhaps ever, a one-and-done character. So, D tier. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was such a welcome moment for me. The past 4 movies that we just discussed, honest to God, made me consider giving up on the MCU. They had put out such a consistent stream of terrible, underdelivered, bad movies that I was ready to give up. And then they gave us this masterpiece, and it restored all of my hope for the MCU. Honestly, Guardians of the Galaxy, beautiful. James Gunn killed it. Side note, I'm really excited to see what he does for DC. Dude, this was such a great movie. Seeing all those beloved characters back again, seeing, take notes, Thor Ragnarok, a great blend of comedy and seriousness, seeing an amazing villain that you genuinely love to hate because of how much of a scumbag he is, but how much of a great villain he was, seeing Rocket, his intricate backstory, seeing all of his friends, seeing their tragic end, this movie pulled at your heartstrings while also just being a genuinely good action movie. Adam Warlock was fantastic. Love this movie. Love everything about it. It is an easy S tier to me. We now move on to the only movie on this list that I haven't seen, and that is The Marvels. I didn't see it because I didn't want to see it. I gave it a week. The reviews were terrible. I don't think there's anything about this movie that I want to be a part of. Because of that, I myself can't rank it, but I can rank it based off what I know is the agreed upon consensus, and that is that this movie sucked. D tier. Now move on to the latest MCU movie, which is Deadpool versus Wolverine. We took Deadpool, introduced him into the MCU. We brought back Hugh Jackman. That's pretty much S tier worthy on itself. Not to mention all the amazing cameos. Blade, Gambit, Elektra. Fantastic. Dude, Chris Evans is Human Torch. Fantastic. A good villain in Cassandra Nova. I don't think an elite villain, but a good villain at the same time, while also merging in aspects of the TVA. Dude, what can you say about it? It was a great movie. S tier. We got a decent amount of S tiers right now, but I think we can all agree upon that most of us, even if you wouldn't have all these in S tier, they'd probably at least be A tier to you. I kind of did the same thing with these last two movies that I did with the Tobey and Andrew movies. Because we introduced Deadpool, I'm going to count the other two movies as being MCU. I didn't do that for Wolverine just because this wasn't the same version of Wolverine that we had been used to. So, and also I didn't want to rank all those because this is also already a long video. But I'm going to rank the Deadpool movies. Deadpool 1, fantastic. Awesome, beloved character doing exactly what he is supposed to be in the comics, and that is a comic relief character that is also one of the coolest and just well-developed characters out there. A perfect blend of comedy and action. I'm going to give Deadpool, I'm debating between A tier and S tier. I don't really know where I'm going to put it. I think perhaps if it had a better villain, I'd give it S tier, but I am going to give Deadpool an A tier. We now move on to the last movie in these categories, and that is going to be Deadpool 2. I like Deadpool 2. I don't think it was as good as the first one. And that's just unfortunately what I have to say with it. I liked Cable. I liked Domino. I liked seeing Juggernaut. The kid as the main villain was weird to me. The team-up scene was great, but I just didn't like it as much as the first one. To me, I think it could be an A tier, but because I don't like it as much as the first one, I am going to give it to B tier. So, that's all the Marvel movies that I have ranked at this moment. As of where we are right now, this is all the ones that have been released, plus a couple. Like I said, I'm going to king my favorite movie out of the S tier position, and I'm going to move a doo-doo movie into the F tier. My favorite MCU movie of all time is Spider-Man No Way Home. It brought back Tobey, my favorite Spider-Man. It brought back Andrew, which only added nostalgia. It brought back my favorite villain ever, Green Goblin. It brought back Doc Ock. We got to see Doctor Strange in it. I know, like I said, this movie is fan service. Give me more. They did cameos perfectly, and I have nothing to complain about. My absolute least favorite MCU movie ever, and honestly, it's probably a combination of all the high hopes that I had for it and how much it just utterly disappointed me to my core. It was also the only movie on this entire list that I said I thought about walking out of, and that is Thor: Love and Thunder. Could not stand it. Hated it as a whole. They wasted everything about this movie. I can't stand it. But, guys, this is my tier list. Let me know what y'all think in the comments. I'm sure many of you have differing opinions, but I'd like to hear them. Let me know. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see y'all next time.